Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Weekly News. I'm Derek Levasseur.
And I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And we're back here. Really big story that just popped in the true crime space. This is one that I think almost everyone is familiar with as far as when it occurred, the mystery behind it, and I don't know about the recent news, but we're going to get into it right now. So on September 7th, 1996, 25-year-old rapper Tupac Shakur was fatally shot in a drive-by shooting that occurred when his car was stopped at a red light at East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane in Las Vegas, Nevada. For decades, this case has gone unsolved, but this week the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department arrested a suspect in connection with the 1996 murder of Tupac Shakur. So before you get into it, Stephanie, because obviously there's a lot of details about this case, I think most people are familiar with this investigation, not only because of how famous Tupac was before his death, but also there's been a lot of people throughout the years who's come up as potential suspects. And there's been people who have said they pretty much knew who did this, but it was a matter of having enough to file charges against them. And then you have to talk about Biggie Smalls as well. They thought maybe there was a connection to that because obviously for people who aren't familiar with it, Tupac and Biggie
East side, west side, East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah, they were definitely both very super talented, and they had this, these reputations to protect, and ultimately they were both kind of popping at the same time, and things got said and raps were made, and just like we have even now today with some rappers today, things escalate because some of these individuals are actually from the communities they're rapping about, and they will back up what they're saying. So with that all out of the way, Stephanie, where do we stand right now with this one for anybody who doesn't know?
So listen, this is big for me. This is big for a lot of people because this has been one of those unsolved cases that have really stuck with people, And it was a shock when this happened. I know I live in New York, but for me, Tupac blows Biggie out of the water all day, every day. Lyrics, everything. He was amazing. It was very, 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 very sad. I'm still sad about it. And it's such a waste when because we're going to hear in what this video we're talking about now, what the police think happened. And they think that this happened. And when they say they think they happened or they're speculating that this is what happened, this is probably what happened because they have enough information at this point to have made an arrest. And so they definitely know what happened. And it just seems like such a waste. So stupid. It's such a waste of talent for nothing. So the suspect that was arrested is 60-year-old Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. And you will know him if you're familiar with this case because he talks about it all the time. He wrote a book about it. He was in the Netflix series in 2019 talking about how he was in the car that the bullets were shot from, the bullets that killed Tupac. He's been saying this since the 90s. He's publicly described himself as one of the two living eyewitnesses to Tupac's murder. And like I said, he claimed he was in the passenger seat of the car that these bullets were fired from. Now, law enforcement sources with knowledge of the arrest told the Associated Press that Davis was charged with one count of murder with a gang enhancement, and Chief Deputy District Attorney Mark D. Giacomo has announced that Davis was the, quote, on-ground, on-site commander who ordered the death of Tupac Shakur. Now, reportedly, the shooting stemmed from a conflict between two Compton gangs. So you have Tupac and Suge Knight. If anybody doesn't know Suge Knight, he was basically he ran Death Row Records, which Tupac was signed to. And Tupac and Suge were affiliated with the Mob Peru gang. And Davis, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, he was affiliated with the Southside Compton Crips. Now, the day of the shooting, Tupac was at a boxing match at the MGM Grand. Davis and his nephew, Orlando Anderson, who's been a longtime suspect, by the way, they were also at this boxing match. After the match, Orlando Anderson was attacked near the hotel elevators. They have this on surveillance. And he was attacked by members of Suge Knight's label, Death Row Records. You can see both Tupac and Suge Knight taking part in this attack on Orlando Anderson. After the fight, Tupac and Suge Knight, they get in the black BMW. They're headed to a nightclub for an after party. And then Davis and his nephew and a couple other guys get in their car. And basically, What happens is, according to Jason Johansson, who's a police homicide lieutenant, he says Davis learned that his nephew Orlando was attacked, so he started to devise a plan for revenge. He got a gun from an associate, and then they all got into this white Cadillac. It was Davis, his nephew Orlando Anderson, and two other men, Terrence Brown and DeAndre Smith. He handed the gun to the passengers in the back seat, which were Anderson and Smith. The group then tracked down the black BMW that Shakur and Suge Knight were driving in. They drove alongside of it. They fired from the Cadillac into the BMW, hitting Tupac 4 times and killing one of the greatest people that rap has ever known. Now, the indictment against Davis does not say who pulled the trigger. If I had to guess, I would, and I would say it was probably Orlando Anderson, who was attacked by Suge Knight and Tupac by the elevators, who was in the back seat, but that's just my speculation. Now, earlier this summer, the police reopened the investigation, and on July 17th, they executed a search warrant at a home connected to Davis in Henderson, Nevada. They collected from his house an iPhone, a desktop computer, 4 laptops, a handful of tablets, many of which had shattered screens. There was also a copy of the book Compton Street Legend. Now, this was a book that Davis had written about the murder of Tupac. Well, it's actually supposed to be like a memoir, but he talks about Tupac in it. And he claims in this book that he was in the car that the gun was fired from. They also recovered an issue of Vibe magazine featuring Tupac. They got 2 black tubs full of photos and what law enforcement has alleged to be purported marijuana. What does that mean? Does that mean they think it's marijuana?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would assume marijuana is pretty easy to test.
Right.
So I don't know why they're saying it that way. Maybe it's a matter, I don't know what source you got it from. Maybe they weren't able
Press. Yeah.
So maybe they weren't able to confirm because nobody was charged with it that it was marijuana. But according to police reports, they believed it was marijuana. But because there was maybe no positive test for THC in there, they're just being politically correct. They're making sure they don't get themselves in trouble.
Now, I don't know how much you know about this case, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to tell them what you said to me before we started this. Like,
so I thought you had been involved in this case.
Yeah, you're like, you worked this case. I was
no, so excited. I was like, are you excited to talk about Tupac tonight? Because I am, because I know a lot about this case,
And I was like, no.
And you were like, I know nothing.
Like, you didn't do a show on it? I was like,
I thought you did something on it. I'm so sorry. But regardless, you should.
I don't need to now.
I really, listen, I know it's probably stupid, but when the paramedics and stuff and the police got to the scene, Tupac was still alive, right? And they kept asking him, who did this to you? Who did this to you? And he, his response, he kept saying, fuck you. Fuck you. He's not going to tell, dude. It doesn't matter if it's a rival gang. That's the street code. He's not going to say who did it. And Las Vegas Police Department Detective Dan Long, he's always believed that both Tupac and Suge Knight, who was in the vehicle with him, knew the identity of the shooter. He said, quote, the cars were 2 or 3 feet apart when the shooting occurred. Tupac was the passenger, and he would have been right up against him in an extremely well-lit part of town, end quote. Anybody who's been to Vegas knows that it's never freaking dark there. Man, it's lit up like a Christmas tree 24/7. There's billboards on the side of buildings. It's awful. So when questioned by the police, though, right, Suge Knight refused to speak as well. And I know that dude knew who did it. And I know Tupac knew who did it. And Suge Knight is currently serving a prison term for unrelated charges, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. That dude definitely knew who killed Tupac this whole time, allegedly.
I think a lot of people knew.
Yeah.
Within that group of people, I think a lot of people knew. I wonder though, when it comes to Tupac. Now, I know Orlando was the one that was assaulted by Tupac and Suge before this all went down. Mm-hmm. I wonder how well they knew him. Did they know him because of his association, or did they actually personally know him where if Tupac saw him again, he'd be able to identify him?
If he saw him again, he'd be able to identify him, yes.
Yeah, and then
they knew each other.
How do you know they knew each other? Were they is that your assumption, or is there something that they've said those guys
because Orlando Anderson's been a longtime suspect, and because of this rival gang thing, because they're both gangs in the Compton area, they knew each other.
Well, see, so that's where I'll push back a little bit, because when we were doing a lot of gang work, we had rival gangs like street gangs and stuff, and they may know of them. They may even know their street name. But when you've just been shot, now I agree with you as far as Tupac probably was going to say F you even if he knew the guy's name and date of birth. But it could also have been a situation where he's seeing people in uniform. He's not about that, and he doesn't know this person by name, especially if it was Dwayne and not Orlando. Again, the question becomes, if he looked in the eyes of Dwayne before he shot him, Keith D, did he know, oh, that's Keith D who's about to shoot me? or did he just know him from association of that group?
Well, Keith
So
D
I
is
wondered.
not the guy who was in the back seat. It was another dude.
It was another guy in the back
Yeah.
seat, but the person who was arrested for the shooting was Keith D, correct?
Because he's the only one left alive, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
and
so you're
and because he
you were saying that
planned it.
earlier. I didn't know if you were just like qualifying. You think they got the wrong guy?
No, I don't believe that Keith D shot him. I believe that he planned and orchestrated it, as the police said. He handed the gun to the two guys in the back seat. One of those two guys happened to be Orlando Anderson, the dude, his nephew, the dude that Tupac and Suge Knight just beat up by the elevators.
Right.
Okay, so, and you know about gangs, knowing them as you do, is Orlando gonna let some random dude?
No, he probably would retaliate, and that's what I'm saying. It's one of those things where, let's say the windows in the front are down. They're not usually going to roll down the window all the way. It would just be like a crack where they punch their arm out the window so that they're not completely seen. Or maybe he wanted to be seen, but either way, I would love to be in the brain of Tupac and Suge Knight and know that they 1,000,000% knew who those people were representing, like who they were associated with, without a doubt, especially because they had just gotten an altercation minutes prior to that. They're not idiots. They knew exactly who was in that car.
Right.
And I'm sure within a matter of days, if they didn't already know, they had the names and addresses of these individuals. And there might even be some other murders that took place after this that are connected to this somehow that maybe law enforcement hasn't said publicly or that they just didn't connect the dots to. But I feel like there's been some retaliation in this case already, and it was probably it was probably viewed by the individuals involved as it was handled on the streets. They took care of it on their own.
Well, so that's the thing. Anderson, Orlando Anderson, was basically like a legend on the streets after this for allegedly killing Tupac, right?
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen the documentary on Netflix, the Tupac, it came out in 2019. If you have some time, watch it. It's really riveting. Like, I think you would enjoy it. But yeah, it's like everyone freaking knew, right? And here's the thing. Davis was actually indicted by a grand jury in this case on charges of murder with the use of a deadly weapon. Like I said, he's the only suspect still alive. He's one of two eyewitnesses. Suge Knight's the other one. Suge Knight was in the car with Tupac. He's in prison. He's not talking. Davis wouldn't shut up about it. Okay? He apparently he is responsible for being on law enforcement's radar, and a former Las Vegas detective claimed Davis talked himself right into jail. So in 1998, he gave an interview to BET where he claimed to have been in the front seat of the vehicle that the shots were fired from. And obviously, the interviewer's like, well, who pulled the trigger? And he was like, it just came from the back seat, bro. I have no idea. So he's being a little cautious here, right? Even putting yourself in the freaking car, you dumbass. You shouldn't be doing that. Why are you drawing attention to yourself? In 2009, Davis confessed to the police that he had a role in the shooting, but his statement could not be used as evidence because it was made under what's called a proffer agreement. And this means the suspect agrees to provide potentially useful information to an investigation, but the statements made generally can't be used as evidence against that suspect. So they couldn't do anything about it. Then he was in that Netflix documentary about Tupac's murder that I was just talking about, where he's in there saying the same stuff, like running his mouth. Oh, I was in the car. Then in 2019, he released his memoir, the book we were just talking about, and he says the same stuff. So this cop, Greg Kading, he was a former police detective who was part of the original investigation. He said, quote, he began to go out publicly boasting about his involvement in the murder, and that led law enforcement in Las Vegas taking another look at his claims, and ultimately he talked himself right into jail. And thank God for that. And I honestly think, because since this happened in 96, it's been pretty well known as far as I've heard. Obviously, I'm not on the streets of Compton. I'm not hanging out with the gangs. I don't know what they're actually saying. But from what I hear, they all knew that Orlando Anderson and his uncle Davis had set this up and had done this. And it was kind of like, yeah, they didn't really consider it a bad thing, I guess, because he was attacked and then this was retaliation. I don't know how shooting somebody 4 times is retaliation for getting beat up, but there you have it. And it's just sad. It's sad. It pisses me off because I love Tupac, man. I miss him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. My takeaway from it is I feel like obviously it's getting a lot of headline news, which is why we're covering it. But as you said multiple times, I feel like anybody who had any connection to this, or even just the hip hop community in general, they all kind of knew this already. Even though there was no charge, even though there was no conviction, it's been publicly said by not only the offender but also by associates of both Tupac and other members of other organizations who've come out and said, yeah, it's not a matter, we know who did it. You know, they don't have enough to charge anybody, but I feel like I said earlier was true, where there has been some street justice done over the years in retaliation for Tupac's death. And then there were also retaliation murders for Biggie's death as well. And it got really bloody and really dangerous for a while, which is part of the reason, not to go too far off the path here, but you see interviews from like Snoop Dogg and stuff like that, where that's kind of where he kind of went out on his own and did his own thing. And even Ice Cube, because Death Row was becoming, it was this organization, this entity where they were becoming very famous, and it started to become real, where being associated with Suge Knight could get you killed. And that's why Suge's in prison right now for, I think he ran somebody over. I don't know if it's for something else, but he ran someone over and tried to kill him. Yeah. That was a big thing a few years ago.
Well, do you remember when this first happened? I don't know if you do, but people were saying like Suge Knight had Tupac killed, like had set it up. That was so stupid. Like he had just signed him.
Didn't even like P. Diddy get, like Diddy was involved, so like his name got thrown around. Right, his name got thrown around, and that's what happens, right? As if
Sean Combs had the balls to be involved in anybody getting shot.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's one of those things where a lot of speculation, but as the years progressed, it wasn't even really a mystery anymore. A lot of people knew, like based on what was already put out there and based on what had gotten around on the streets, that these guys were more than likely responsible for it, and you know, it was what it was. So I'm glad that there's some, I guess what would you call it? Some affirmation finally of like, hey, now law enforcement is finally validating what people have said over many years. But I don't think to the people that this case mattered to, this means much.
No.
You know, like they're like, hey, welcome to the party.
Yeah, but I mean, also still he's gone. So
exactly, he's gone. What does it really change, right? So it's one of those things where I'm glad to see that law enforcement stayed on it and we're still working it, even though this was an older case. And I do think it's important to.
Well, I mean, this Davis dude was like, "Come get me for for decades, man." And then finally, they're like, "Okay, we will." But you know what's funny? I mean, it's not funny. It's also sad. You know, that's all sad. Orlando Anderson, the nephew, right, who really triggered all this. How do you think he died?
He got murdered.
Gang violence. He was shot.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I was trying to indirectly, like, it was handled. I feel like
the police say it was not related to Tupac's murder. It was a completely different gang, but regardless,
possible. But I feel like even if let's say for the sake of this conversation, it actually wasn't related. Mm-hmm. Even then, let's say Suge was calling the shots, saying, "Hey, we got money on his head." Once he gets killed by another gang, it's like, well,
Suge.
He's dead.
Not Suge. Suge Knight, the producer.
Suge Knight could have put I mean, if Suge wasn't involved,
you think Suge would do that?
Suge Knight would absolutely, allegedly have someone killed for crossing him or killing his confidant, a friend of his.
Yeah, because it was only 2 years later, man.
Yeah, if I'm taking a shot at this, I think there's probably a connection. But even if there wasn't, I feel like if there was a bounty on his head already, well, guess what? It's null and void now. He's dead. So I feel like at that point, if they knew he was involved or indirectly involved, once he's dead, he's dead. You can't bring him back. Now it's an eye for an eye in the eyes of these people involved.
So how did Dwayne Davis make it this long without getting taken out, being the one who orchestrated it basically and who wouldn't stop running his mouth about it?
Well, I mean, I think I'm going to be really interested to see how they're going to prove that, because if he didn't pull the trigger, I mean, I think Orlando had enough of an incentive to shoot Tupac without anybody instructing him to do it. He just got his ass kicked, and so he's going to go
confess to the police.
So I mean, now he's confessing, but I think people were really at the time concerned with the gunman, concerned with the guy who shot Tupac, and I feel like once Orlando was killed, that was the end of it, you know. And maybe now he's confessing, like, hey, not only did Orlando kill him,
I think
I was the one who orchestrated this.
Back when they said he had that deal where they couldn't use anything against him, you know what I mean? In 2009, dude, he confessed to the police that he had a role in the shooting. But because of that proffer agreement, they couldn't do shit about it. They couldn't
charge him then.
Which is crazy to me that they've basically known since 2009. He put it all out there at that point, I believe, which is probably why they know what happened now.
Probably. And it's like I said, I'm glad we have some answers, especially is Tupac's mother. I know in the Netflix documentary.
Tupac's mother is alive, yes.
Yeah, she was alive. And I remember seeing some clips from that, how emotional she was wanting to know and obviously losing her son.
She's always known it was Orlando Anderson, according to her.
Yeah. So I still don't. I don't know. I wonder how it would work with that whole proffer agreement. I mean, we could go on this for days, but I know that he's in that situation. Basically, the offender is given, it's like a contract basically where the defendant or the person who's involved in the actual investigation agrees to provide prosecutors with information that's going to lead to an arrest. It's got to be like really important, imperative information to hope, close a crime.
Yeah.
So if that was the case, how could they charge him now? Like that agreement, I would assume would be infinite, but I guess maybe there was a time limit on it, or maybe he didn't live up to what he had promised in the initial contract. I don't know. I don't know how.
The police kind of said this multiple times. He spoke publicly about it, they said. Maybe he made an agreement that he shouldn't be talking about this. And when he started running his mouth, like I said in the Netflix documentary, and then he came out with this freaking memoir where he says the same thing the next year, the police were like, okay, now, you didn't keep your end of the agreement. You were not supposed to be talking about this.
And I will say, take it for what it's worth. Just searched it quick on Google. It does say here, it is the proffer agreement is not a promise of absolute immunity or a plea agreement, but an agreement between the defendant and the government for a certain level of, quote, use immunity. A proffer agreement is often a door to making someone a cooperating defendant who may be eligible for a favorable, less severe sentencing recommendation. So maybe whatever the agreement was, whoever the fish was that he was going to catch them.
It wouldn't have been related to the Tupac investigation then, because Orlando was already dead.
Well, that's my point. If they were like, hey, we want to know who shot Tupac, and he's like, sure, and they do this proffer agreement, and then he says it was Orlando, and they're like, well, he's already dead. That ain't going to lead to a successful prosecution. That deal's null and void.
So then why didn't they do anything freaking since 2009?
Your guess is as good as mine on that one.
I'd like to know.
Who knows what happened behind those? And I know you got a lot of cooks in the kitchen on that case. A lot of people, both inside and outside, trying to be part of it, right? You have Netflix, you have all these different PIs and all these former law enforcement agencies, FBI agents. Everyone's taking a shot at it. You thought I had a show on it. Apparently.
I did. I thought you did something on it or gave an interview about it or something.
A lot of asks to do it, but
I was so excited. I sent you the script and I waited and I was like, oh, he's gonna see it and be so excited to talk about this. And then I was like, oh shit.
No, we got it done.
Yeah.
So overall, we're happy for Tupac's family.
Yeah.
That if this was something that they wanted, I hate to use the word closure, but they wanted validation that their beliefs over all these years are now confirmed by law enforcement investigators who have been in the case for years, who have access to information that the public does not have access to. And, to charge someone after all these years, it should be a pretty strong case, because it's going to be hard to charge someone and get a conviction after all these years when some of the things that you've laid out has happened, right? Like why? The question is why now? And we're going to find out. And I'm assuming it's because of how high profile this case is. Law enforcement clearly feels they have enough to get a conviction, because if they don't, it's going to be pretty embarrassing for them.
Well, I almost wonder, too, if Tupac's family was like, yo, this dude's freaking talking about this every chance he can get, basically confessing on Netflix in his book, and you guys are doing nothing?
You said, he's been doing that for a while. Why now? Why 2023?
He was pretty covert about it. When he talked to BET, he was like, oh, I don't know who pulled the trigger. I didn't see, But then he starts talking a lot more in 2018, 2019. So that kind of adds up. I don't know. It's very sad. The whole gang thing is very sad, because you have a lot of young men in their 20s just killing each other for stupid things like pride, ego, money, drugs, all these young lives being cut short for absolutely no reason. I even feel bad for Orlando Anderson, even though I love Tupac, because it's like he was pulled up into this thing that was much larger than either of them, and they felt they had to behave in a certain way to keep respect and clout and all that. And what did it get them? Killed. It got them killed, and it's sad.
Yeah, you have individuals who are looking for a sense of family, looking for a father figure, a brother, or something like that, and these groups, they capitalize on that. You become part of something, which is maybe something that they're not experiencing at home. So it can get them involved in some things that they shouldn't be. And then to gain the respect of the people that they look up to, they will do things that they shouldn't be doing, and then they lose their way, and then they're doing it on their own. So a lot of variables that come into that. I've worked with a lot of former and current gang members, and I will tell you, I obviously don't approve of most of the things they do, but they're not all like you would think. They're not all bad people. No. And I've told you this before, where some of them end up turning into informants, not necessarily on their own, but on rival gangs, to help benefit themselves. And I'm aware of that. But
most of these guys get in there so young, man. No, they're not bad people. They didn't know any other way. Like, it's just so sad. Now,
I will say, just to play the other side of the coin there's guys that are just some assholes.
Sure.
That just like, you look at their family structure and you look at their home life and it's perfect. Like there's no reason, but they just want that. They look at
clout.
It as I don't even know how to explain it, but they're a lot of the cases they're posers, those guys. But
like Aaron Hernandez.
I don't know if he was a poser. Honestly, I don't know why he was doing it, but from what we uncovered and what we learned,
I think he started out as a poser.
And I think he was pretty legitimate. To be honest with you, I think he was pretty legitimate. I think he bought into that lifestyle more than the NFL lifestyle.
That's so sad.
I think he was pretending to be an NFL player, professional player. Although he was very good, I think
so much talent though, right? Another Aaron Hernandez, Tupac, so much talent.
Yeah.
You affiliated with the wrong people. Even when you had money, you were on your way up. You continue to hold on to this old part of your life, and they do it out of loyalty. They do it out of having roots. They do it out of keeping their credentials in the street, and it's sad, man. Tupac.
I agree.
Oh, it's so sad.
Thinking about Tupac's family and friends, hope this gives them something that maybe they were missing before, maybe that final piece to close this chapter and move on with their lives, knowing that this person is now being publicly held accountable by agencies that can actually do something about it and maybe get this guy off the street so he's not bragging about it in documentaries anymore. I think that would be a benefit to the family. I'm sure that bothered them every time they had to see or hear that.
Disrespect on another level, man.
We'll see how it plays out. Any final words?
He was indicted by a grand jury, so I think a trial, if a trial comes and he doesn't get a plea agreement, I think we should be okay. The grand jury is usually like, we think you have enough evidence to go to trial.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that they got the indictment, it does bode well, but now you're going to have a defense attorney come in and they're going to pull up everything they have over the years. So
right.
We will see how it goes. Any final words from you?
Got to keep your head up.
I can't believe you just did that for anyone on video. I'm you know what? I'm so happy for everyone who's only on audio right now and didn't witness the
no one's on audio. It's Crime Weekly News. How dumb do you feel?
I mean, we do one episode on a rapper.
That wasn't a gang gesture.
I don't know what it was. But suddenly Stephanie's a part of the Crips. I don't know what just happened here, but I'm going to go now because I'm embarrassed.
We're only on video. It's Crime Weekly News.
No, Crime Weekly News has actually been on audio for the last 3 weeks.
Are you for real?
Yeah. Welcome to everybody. Crime Weekly News has been on audio for the last 3 weeks. Yep. Oh my God.
I know. It's been a long week.
We appreciate you being here. Make sure you stay tuned the rest of this week. We have our second part of the Taylor Shabusiness series coming up. This is the final part.
Yes, it is.
And we have a great interview with Dr. Chris Mohandi, as we said we would.
Amazing.
We actually, as we're recording this, we just did the interview. So we already, it was really insightful. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it.
I didn't want to let him leave. I had so many more questions.
Yeah, we were going for a while. That's why we're running late tonight, but it was worth it. That's a good one.
Worth it.
So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a great episode. And as I just said, we are now on audio and video for both Crime Weekly News.
Hey guys, did you know we're on audio and video for Crime Weekly News and Crime Weekly?
Yeah.
Special.
How about that, Stephanie, huh?
I think it's awesome.
You're doing a great job promoting this stuff.
Thank you.
Great job.
I think you forgot to tell me, but that's okay.
I would think you'd be subscribed and, when the notifications pop up for your own podcast.
I am, but I am subscribed to so many podcasts, I can't have them automatically downloading. Do you know that happens? They automatically download to your phone, dude?
Do you think there's any justifiable excuse for you not knowing what episodes are coming out for your own podcast when you only have one podcast?
On audio? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not, nope, there's no justification.
You know what? I respect that. I respect the hell out of you for that one. Guys, appreciate you being here. Everyone stay safe out there. We will see you later this week.
Bye.